Good morning, everyone. My name is Courtney Gold. Thank you for joining us today. I want to appreciate everyone taking their time and energy and effort to join us. We'll kind of slowly kick it off because I know a few people will start trickling in here. But just to kind of let you guys know what we're going to be talking about today. It's day 2 app is deployed. The database is on fire. We have Robert Reeves today from Liquibase. He's the CTO. And we have Melissa McKay, our wonderful developer advocate from JFrog. So before we kind of kick into the actual presentation, I want to let you guys know this is being recorded. You will get a follow-up email with this recording so you can share it with your team and watch it later. And we also have the Q&A chat window that I will be moderating. We will take in those questions if it's relevant to the current conversation. I'll interrupt our 2 wonderful speakers and we'll answer it right then and there, or we'll take it after the event is over. But other than that, I will kind of let them go because I know you guys don't want to listen to me. They're much more interested than I. So go ahead, you guys. Thank you.
Awesome. Glad that you all could make it. I'm glad to be here with Robert as well, even though we're from a distance and trapped in our little Zoom windows. It's okay. This is going to be a pretty informal conversation, but I think it's a really important one, especially for developers, anyone doing anything with DevOps, and anyone that has applications that use a database for your source input. So Robert, I'm excited to talk with you. You have all of this information on the deployment side and the database side, and I want to start all the way at the beginning at the development side. I've been a developer advocate now for almost 2 years. I have been a developer, though, prior to that, 20 plus years. All kinds of frameworks, all kinds of applications, all the way from desktop to web applications as well. Not once, well, not anymore do I find developers that usually stick with one language and only one language. I'm primarily a Java programmer. I am a Java champion, and I tell people that's what I like to code in, but I rarely meet a Java developer these days that doesn't need to know Node or front-end technologies or scripting, Python, and a little bit of SQL. So we're going to talk about that a lot today. Robert, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you come from.
Well, I am a recovering release engineer. So back in the day, we used to call it software configuration management. So for way too many years, I have been the person that took code from dev to test, all points in between, and got it out to production. And man, dealing with the database sure is a pain. So that's why me and the team, we started figuring out what can we do to help all of our friends out with Liquibase, because that was the thing that always messed us up. Whether it was just getting changes together, those sorts of things. And so, at the end of the day, at Liquibase, we're not about providing software. We're about helping people have happy hours, date nights, little league games, all the things they want to do, but they can't because they're stuck dealing with the database. And so for me personally, I think work-life balance is really important. I also think allowing people to work on high impact tasks, that is my sole purpose in life. And so that's hopefully what we're doing with Liquibase and our friends at JFrog.
Awesome. I totally resonate with those thoughts. I've definitely been on teams where everything was great, testing went great, everything was wonderful, and we deployed to production and we missed a column in the database and everything blew up. So yeah, those things are pretty scary. It's easy for developers especially to forget that part because sometimes it just doesn't happen till the end. That's not how it should be, but that's what happens. And all of these movements to try to, improve that communication no longer is, dealing with the database only a database admin's job. It is now, important for the developer to know as well what is going on and keep track of what's going into the next release and things like that, and manage that just as carefully as they would their source code. So there was an experience of mine when I joined a DevOps team. I'm going to age myself a little bit here, but I was one of those developers that worked in a silo, headphones on, in a corner, did my own thing. Then I moved into pairing. That was really intimidating at first, but it was an amazing improvement. Once we got used to it and got used to our partners, it was amazing. We were able to get a lot done, moved a lot faster. Then we moved into continuous integration. That was the next thing that came around. I had this wonderful experience where I had a tiny little team. We had a little build server that was in a shed. And when we would check in code that would break, we had a siren attached to the build server, and it would literally, start a siren running. So that was my introduction to continuous integration and helped me not to forget to run my unit tests before checking in my code. Then we got into more of the testing frameworks, learning how to automate our testing. Then we learned into, more complicated integration testing, things like that. And then came DevOps. And that was pretty interesting, a DevOps team. So no longer were we in a silo where we only saw our IDEs every day. We started getting exposure to all of these other tools that were needed for deployments and for production environments, for observing their behavior, for routing requests, for dealing with the whole microservice movement, breaking up all of our services into microservices. These were decisions that were made because of DevOps, realizing that the way we deployed our application had a lot to do with the decisions we would make in designing the application to begin with. And I think the database fits in that too. And this is a slide. I just want to talk about this a little bit. I love showing this because it's so ugly. There's just so much here. And this is a really good sense of how overwhelming it is to join a DevOps team to begin with. And one of the misconceptions is that you really need to know everything. But the whole point of your team is that you utilize each other's experiences or each other's expertise. So you don't need to, you still have your specialties. My specialty was development, others were operations. So I could rely on my team members to give me advice on certain deployments, certain techniques, certain strategies, that kind of thing. But there's a lot here. There's a lot of steps in all of this process. And Robert, I'm waiting for you to say what's missing here.
There is something missing here. Interesting. I'm going to take databases for 200, Alex.
You win. Yeah, this is something that isn't reflected on this huge slide with all of these tools and frameworks and stuff. We don't talk about it very much. We don't talk about it enough. It's not that it's not included, it's just that we forget that it needs to be a part of all of these steps. Even at the beginning, when you're doing continuous integration, you should also be doing continuous integration with your database.
Yes. Well, and it's also, for a long time, it's always been somebody else's problem. It's always been, oh, well, our DBA is going to take care of that. And for so long, decades, our DBAs have been the sentinels of data. You shall not pass. And for all the right reasons. I would argue that the most important asset that a company has is not the tech stack, it's the data. And I'm not talking about the database, I'm talking about the data in there. That is super valuable. Something goes wrong, you're going to lose customer orders, you're going to lose history of transactions. This is something that you cannot afford to mess up. However, we are going so much faster because of companies like JFrog of pushing out applications faster and faster and faster, and for all the right reasons. Software is eating the world, as Mark Andreessen taught us, and that we need to move faster. We're all software companies, ergo the ones that write the best software will win. we must include the database as part of that. It is, part of the uppercase A application, not the lowercase a compiled bits. Like you were saying earlier, if we push out a change and it's dependent on a database schema change and they don't go in lockstep, we're going to have problems. And that just undercuts all of the value that we work so hard to achieve with DevOps. It needs to go alongside it. It is a day two problem, though. There needs to be that commitment. I'm going to get faster. I'm going to adopt DevOps. I'm going to start automating my application pushes. But DevOps is an algorithm. You solve the first problem in front of you, then look for the next biggest rock, and then the next one, and then the next one. I believe for a lot of companies that have started along their DevOps journey, that the next thing that they're going to hit is that database. That's the biggest challenge they're going to face next, which is a good thing. It means you solved the first one. Yay.
Yes,
You did
I
it.
agree. I feel like maybe it is coming along a little later because it's more on the deployment side. And like you said, focus on the first bottleneck that you have in your process.
Yes.
Improve that before you move on. Well, now we're finally there. We're to the database, and no more of this rolling your own solutions for updating the database. There are now some pretty cool tool sets out there that even developers now can utilize to make that happen for you.
Yeah, but there's a real problem we've got here, Melissa. All right. I'm looking at an eye chart with all these different tools. And if there was only a way that I could see maybe an example of them all put together, of just what does it look like from the developer's perspective, addressing this database problem? What does it look like from the DBA's perspective? How do all these things fit together? Do you know of anything? Is there something out there? Perhaps?
I have a feeling there might be. There might be something that you and I worked on really closely together. We have a really good example of a real life software project. I feel like this is what's missing a lot in a lot of demos and blogs and things like that. It's one thing to take something and do a happy path, but what we did was take an existing software project out there. It's a really popular one called Pet Clinic, and I like it.
I believe I've heard of this.
Yes. I like it. It's used in a lot of Java demos. It's a Spring Boot application, and I went ahead and containerized it. And we just pretended that we were going to set up shop with that application. We have a production database out there and a test database out there. And we practiced this whole problem with day two, where you already have your database, you already have data in there. You don't want to destroy it. You want to make sure that you're carefully upgrading what you need to upgrade without losing your data. And it is definitely a different process than when you're starting fresh, as a lot of blogs do.
Yeah, the way that what I really liked about it is that the approach that you came up with this video is to, all right, I have an existing application. It's running, like you said, production data. And one of the things that we should strive to do with software is leave it better than you found it. The scouting, one of the many scouting mottos, right? So as I recall, the way this worked is that you took Pet Clinic, you had an existing bit of data in there, you had a running app, and you needed to add a feature. And no spoilers, I'm not going to talk about this great new feature. You got to watch the video to see it. But let's make a change. And then we run into the database problem. How are we going to align that database change with the code change that you had done? Because you had that process laid out. You containerized the app. You're using a lot of the JFrog DevOps toolkit tooling to automate this. And then how do we put all this stuff together? And there was a back and forth that we had. You were playing the developer. I was playing the database administrator. And so I think it would be a really good thing for the folks on the webinar to check out, and you're going to get an email with a link to this after the webinar. But, think of this as the lecture. We're talking broad conceptual things, and the video, and also going to GitHub and checking out that repository, you're actually going to be able to go to the lab, actually put this in action and see it working. Just speaking for Liquibase, and I think JFrog's the same way. We communicate with code. We communicate and share these examples. This is not marketecture. This is not, this is actually working to help you go to that little league game, go hit the happy hour, go have a date night, those sorts of things. So you can focus on what's really important, moving your company forward and having a work-life balance. These two things can happen together. They can happen. I promise you.
So I don't want to keep it secret. I definitely was involved in some roll your own solutions for this problem. And when I took a look at Liquibase, I was pretty impressed. It solves a lot of issues. Can you tell us a little bit more, Robert, what exactly it solves? I have a lot of war stories I can share with you about things that happened when I deployed and forgot migration or adding a column and things like that. But give us some examples of what you can look forward to not having to deal with by using a tool like this.
No, that's good. Starting from the problem. All right. And this is the challenge that we've seen from our perspective at Liquibase, is that there seems to be two paths to production based on whether it's application code or database code. The application code, we've solved this problem. We check it into source code control. There's a CI process. There's a CD process. There's other things we're doing along the way. Checking for security violations, making sure that we're meeting standards, those sorts of things. We've got the pipeline. It's great. Database. Well, let's write a ticket and let's assign it to somebody. And tickets, that is a DevOps anti-pattern. Don't do it. If you have to write a ticket for something, stop and automate it. Like seriously, stop. Just don't do it. Figure out how you can automate that process. And so that is the problem that we're solving. What we're trying to do at Liquibase is align our automated CI/CD process that we have for the application with the database. That sounds good, but these are kind of different things, right? I mean, I can blow away that container and release a new one. Oops. Oh, that was a bad release. Well, we can roll back easily. Database is not so much. We can't just zap a database and rebuild the schema. We're going to lose all of our data. So Liquibase takes a migration-based approach where we're going to make one change and the next change and the next change. So prior to doing that, Liquibase is going to look at the database and say, okay, what state are you at? What version are you? Are you at 1, 2, 3? Okay. And then it's going to look at a artifact, which you should put in Artifactory as part of your release, and see, we have 10 changes in here. All right. I'm creating a table, adding a column, these sorts of things. I'm evolving my database schema safely. Well, if the version is at 3, Liquibase is going to look at that artifact and say, oh, okay, well, I need to run 4, 5, 6 all the way up to 10. Maybe the version is at 8, so we only have to run 9 or 10. And so you're automating not only the database change, but you're making sure that you don't rerun scripts or you make changes again because it bombs out. Along the way, we can also check and enforce your standards. So things like, let's make sure a table starts with T underscore. Maybe you have some naming convention at your company. All right, we can enforce that. make sure that we don't drop things because we have a no drop rule, no dropping columns, no dropping tables. Okay, great. We can do that as well. So think about that as maybe a unit test or something that is making sure that you're not going to blow anything up. At the end of the day, that is what Liquibase does. We're trying to align that automated CI/CD process with the database. And not make you go and build a whole shadow DevOps team for the database. That doesn't help anybody. Of course, along the way, keeping track of status and reporting, that's another thing that Liquibase does. So all the DevOps goodness just for your database.
This is true. And the way that Liquibase works takes advantages of a lot of the best practices and strategies that we already do in our DevOps processes. There's a few that I can think of that are super important. Just like artifacts, when you build a new application and you produce a new artifact, you want that artifact, not a recompiled version, not a modification of it or a variant of it. You want that artifact to be promoted across all of your development and release stages so that you know that you have, you're testing the right thing. So for a database, I think it's super important. Developers are going to be blowing away a database all the time on their local machines. So there needs to be another stage in between that is integration testing environment that has a database that is as much like production as possible. It contains data. It is not blown away every time. This is where you can catch any migration problems, things that you've missed, determine how to roll back when necessary, that kind of stuff. All of that said, make sure you have a backup of your staging environment. I've been in, this is another practice. DevOps best practice is protect your environments depending on, where they're at. Make sure you're taking advantage of, that least privilege idea. When I was a junior developer, I used to get offended when I wasn't allowed to access a production machine or a staging machine even. And I understand now, many years later, why that is. It's nothing personal. You don't want to have access to those machines. I've been in situations where we had an intern accidentally launch test data into our staging machine and blew it away. So, but knowing that can happen, we had a backup and we're able to recover pretty quickly. But these are all some strategies that you can use to protect yourself for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. Is the intern okay? Good learning experience?
Yes, we okay. Scared him. It was kind of mean, but he learned, No,
I like
after he apologized profusely, we told him we've all done it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do enjoy the every couple of weeks, there's always some tweet that goes out about, hey, let's make the junior folks comfortable with making mistakes and talking about our worst mistakes ever, because that's how you learn. Yes. You need to have freedom to, experiment, take risks, but hopefully do it in a safe way and give your chance a way to get back out of that room if you need to.
Yes, you need guardrails and you need padding, and these are what mentors can provide to you, give you a safe place to experiment and to learn without causing too much damage, taking too much risk.
Absolutely. Well,
I think this has been an excellent conversation. You really should go see the video. It's good. I have more ideas about tackling, other ways that updating your database can go wrong. There's so many ways, and addressing each one of those, it would be really good material for all of you.
And if someone can say they've never made a mistake, they're lying. So we've all done it, everyone. So, and that's how we learn, right? So by making mistakes, you learn from them. But thank you guys again. This was wonderful. As Melissa said, she has that video that will be in the follow-up. Also, this recording will be in the follow-up. As I mentioned at the beginning, please put your questions in the Q&A chat. We do have a few that we'll get to right now, and just kind of please trickle them in. We'll get them through. If we can't get to them, please just email webinars@jfrog.com. That's webinars@jfrog.com, and we will get to those after if we can't get to them now. But the first question is a great question. I know you guys will probably both giggle at this one a little bit, but what's your favorite open source DevOps tool?
Oh, I'm going first on this one. I'm going to say JFrog Artifactory, and I'll tell you why. So there was, at early days of Liquibase, we had some challenges on how are we going to distribute that artifact, that change log that we depend upon. Can't put it in source code control because that's somewhere far away from where the, test and staging and production environments are. And so we asked ourselves, well, where do we put the application, that artifact, that releasable thing that we're going to push out? And it was just clear as day, we're going to put it in Artifactory. And so because that existed, because it's open source, because it's so widely used, it was just a slam dunk solution for us and just saved a whole lot of hassle and heartache. Also made the our Liquibase users really comfortable, because by saying, oh yeah, you just put it in Artifactory, and they say, oh, like we put the application. Great. Yay, we did it. So it helped us, but it also helped the customers, helped everybody.
Great. All right, well, I'm going to have to say Liquibase. I first encountered Liquibase, I'm going to say it was two positions ago, 2 teams ago. And I've said before, we were involved in rolling our own solutions, right? And I remember coming across Liquibase and thinking, wow, we spend a lot of time and didn't get as far as this product already has. A lot of the problems that we were experiencing day to day, things like adding, dropping columns, things like that, changing data types. That's another one that we've come across. Adding tables, removing tables, being able to roll back. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting one that we haven't really discussed, but I think it's something that's really necessary if you make a change that really doesn't roll back easy. You need to consider that and be thoughtful about that. Mm-hmm. And then also being able to test all of those changes, in each subsequent stage of development, being able to utilize, that it's in your source code, right? Your change logs are in your source code. It's just the perfect spot for them. So it makes sense. And, your schema is, like you said, Robert, your artifact that you need to protect, just like your application artifact. And it should have, its own deployment process and have its own world. Liquibase definitely helps with that and assists making things easier. One of the other strategies, the DevOps strategy, if you can't automate, although Liquibase does allow you to automate pretty easily database changes, but the next important thing is to make it self-service. And what's cool about Liquibase is it moves that work all the way from the DBA down to the developer's hands now. We're the ones doing the work. We're the ones putting that feature in where it matters. And instead of having to schedule a DBA for a deployment that could be, down the road because of marketing priorities or, things like that, we're able to just take care of it right then and there and make sure that our update matches the feature that we're adding currently in the latest code base.
Well, thank you.
Great stuff.
Great things about both of you guys, and just about both tools and everything. So, another question is there a process difference between setting up a new database versus an existing database?
We're talking about setting up Liquibase with a new database versus an existing database. And I pretty sure we did this in the video. We used generate changelog. And so what this does, this is a Liquibase command that will reverse engineer the existing schema. I have yet to see somebody start out a project with Liquibase, like from first commit, we're going to use Liquibase, unless they're already using it at their shop, at their company. I've never seen that. It's always been an existing database. It's really exciting starting a new project. Like, oh, okay, I'm going to do all this stuff, and like, oh crap, now I got to get it off my machine and somewhere else. And so for a existing database, has tables, relationships, indexes, all those sorts of things. You would use generate changelog. If you were starting up something new, you could just use an empty changelog. Hey, guess what? Generate changelog will create that for you. And I'm pretty sure that we have something that's going to make that a init process a lot easier, coming out in a matter of weeks, where, and I actually think we're calling it Liquibase init. We'll see. Don't hold me to it. But just like get init, okay, let's set this up and set up the project. So they're similar yet different. I don't think either of them are more difficult than the other one. Just that we've put a lot of work into that reverse engineering stuff, a lot of work across a whole bunch of different databases. So I highly recommend using it because, one, it's battle tested, and two, really useful, and just capturing all that stuff. It can also help atone for sins of the past, where it's like, man, this is a really big database schema. I don't even know where to start. Nah, it's cool. We got your back. Use generate changelog. We got you.
I'm so glad to hear it. I'm excited to see what's coming out next, Robert. I want to check it out. But this is like one of the more, responsible things to do is to make sure you're not just solving the happy path. That there are a lot of projects out there, and there's a lot of population that are dealing with legacy code and legacy setups, stuff that is already entrenched, and it makes it nice when a product like Liquibase keeps that in mind makes that process easier for developers in order to integrate it into their tool sets.
Well, for sure. And thank you for saying that. Look, who are we to presume what is the right thing for our users? I know. Why don't we just listen to them and just see what they want and just deliver it? Let's look at, and this is the power of open source. So we can look at pull requests. We can look at bug reports for the open source stuff, and guarantee if somebody is spending time on a PR, spending time on an issue, working on documenting, updating the documentation because it's not clear, that should tell our product team that's smoke. There's a fire somewhere in there, and it's incumbent upon us to fix that. If we're stewards of this open source project, we need to listen, and we need to not only take that PR, fix that issue, but also improve upon it. So, for example, we've seen a lot of companies that are using Liquibase for, relational databases. And then they come to us and they say, hey, and like it's a secret, like they're embarrassed, we got DB2 on Z. Can you help us with that? Like they're embarrassed about the mainframe. Like, oh no. Hey, that's cool. That runs the entire airport transportation, airline industry. It's okay. Credit card, all transactions go through a mainframe. And so that's what we're coming out with next, improving upon that. So we listen to our customers just like JFrog does. And that is the power of open source.
Wonderful. We have another question coming in, and again, don't be shy. Make sure to put those questions in. But this question is, how do you identify the correct JDBC driver?
Yeah, that's a pain. Like, which one do I use? Which one? So there's a couple ways. One is Liquibase does ship with a lot of those JDBC drivers in there. We don't have everything because that's be really big. All right. So we're hitting most of the big ones there. And so you can use the ones that come with Liquibase when you install it. Okay, great. We also came up with something, and it's open source, and it's called Liquibase Package Manager. Sound familiar? LPM, So we looked at what was going on with our friends at NPM and what they were doing. And we're like, wow, okay, we need to work on that. And so open source, you can get it from GitHub, github.com/Liquibase. Go look for LPM, and Liquibase Package Manager. And it runs very similar to NPM. So if you're familiar with installing node packages, great. You're going to be real comfortable with that. And so it will get, you could search, oh, I'm looking for the Oracle, the MariaDB driver, SQL Server, those sorts of things. Great. We can get that. Also, we got a pretty robust extension community. So people that are adding extensions, like, for example, our friends at Google Cloud, they wrote the extension for Google Cloud Spanner. Cool, great. And so you can install that extension in Liquibase and from the command line with LPM. You can also automate it. In fact, we use Liquibase Package Manager in our Docker container. So that's how we get the drivers. That's how we get the extensions there. So we drink our own champagne. So if I was concerned about how do I get the right JDBC driver, I'd be looking at Liquibase Package Manager.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, here's one more. We have a couple more questions. We should have time for it. But how does JFrog and Liquibase manage it if there are multiple processes impacting the database at once?
That's a pain. Well, Melissa, how do you do this? I mean, you've got, if we're in JFrog land,
yeah,
we've got multiple deployments we want to push. What do we do here?
Yeah, you've got to put some strategies in there to be thoughtful about that. A lot of that on the deployment side. Making sure that communication is there so that you aren't running over the top of another deployment. I would put it, I would suggest making sure that you test those kinds of things in your integration test environment. I know my teams, we would always perform a deploy on the staging the same way we would do a deploy in production. And every now and then we would catch little issues like that we didn't realize would happen. Yeah. And that they have been a saving grace for sure.
Yeah. I mean, because Liquibase is going to piggyback on your existing CI/CD process, I assume that if you're automating CI/CD, that you have solved this problem, that your tooling has figured out, nope, I'm already deploying to staging. Y'all got to wait, right? There's, and so you've solved the problem on the application side. And we think that you should use that same strategy for Liquibase, because remember, you're not going to do anything different with your application deployments when you start using Liquibase. You're already deploying the app, lowercase a, compiled bits, and so there's going to be one more step. Okay, maybe before that, call Liquibase. Let's set up the database, make those database schema changes. Okay, now we're ready for the app deploy. All right, great. There is one thing in Liquibase where we recognize that maybe two people running Liquibase on the same database is a bad idea. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put a little flag in a table, one of our meta tables. So we have one for versioning and one for who's doing what to the database right now. And so if Liquibase sees, hey, somebody's in here. So it's like, it's the lock for the bathroom. That's what it is, occupied. And so that it's going to say, you've got to wait. And it's nice about it. It says, hey, we're going to check this. Okay. It looks like we're free. Now here's the cool thing, because Liquibase takes that migration-based approach. If somebody runs the same exact change log against that database, Liquibase is going to say, oh no, we're good. We've already done this. It's okay. Thank you for asking. I already took care of it. And so that's how we manage that process. But I would very much like to see in your DevInt environment, a lot of people hitting it at the same time with changes. And so, maybe in staging, if you want to do it that far back, but a lot of practice, like you were saying, Melissa, this is, if we have the same deployment process that we're using in dev, test, stage, UAT, whatever, then we're not going to have surprises in production. When we start having a different bespoke process for every single environment, that's when we run into problems, because we're having, humans involved in it. We should do it over and over again, because I guarantee you, if we're doing the same steps from dev all the way to production, we're going to catch it before production. We're going to catch it. And that's the power of automation. We do the same thing over and over again, so there's no surprises.
Yep.
Surprises suck in IT.
They do, yes. I remember one of the first things I needed to fix on a team was the fact that our applications didn't shut down gracefully. And that caused some database issues for sure. This is the responsibility of the app developer, right? Make sure you're taking care of your startup. Make sure that, if the database needs to be alive and responding before your application is going to function, put those controls in there to make sure that, you're making the requests that you need to be transactional, that lock on the door, make sure that that's happening in your application. And these are just development strategies that we shouldn't be ignoring, for the sake of shipping something out quickly, because it's difficult to solve once it's already out there and behaving badly. It's best to catch that stuff early.
Yeah. Well, and it's also just good manners.
Yes.
I mean, it's like, let's be honest. Let's look at this. I mean, we're talking about production, all right? That is not owned by anybody. That's a shared space, all right? And we're all working together to make sure that we're putting the best code out there. You don't just show up at somebody's house you've been invited to and start rearranging the furniture. You don't start, you're like, you're polite, maybe bring a side dish, nice bottle of wine, maybe some flowers, and that's how you do it. You're going into a shared space. Don't be a jerk. Make sure that you're not leaving a mess for somebody else. And when we start looking at these environments as shared spaces, that we are all benefiting from them, and that it is ours, not any one person or team, I think that that improves everybody's life. Everybody's happier then.
Yes, definitely. And it brings down your troubleshooting time. That's for sure. I remember a situation where, and this is one thing that Liquibase is good at, right? It gives you this process that everyone follows to update a database. No one is just, manually going in and making changes. Mm-hmm. And that happens still. I remember having problems with an application. It turned out that searches were really slow. And our first thought was, well, it's a production database. There's a lot more data in there, and that's why. Well, it turns out that there were indexes removed and changed that did not match our test environments. That's because you should also be going through the process of adding indexes using something like Liquibase.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about configuration drift. We've got environments, and that is always caused by human intervention. We apply it to one environment, we forget to do the other ones. And that's not a bad thing. That's just how humans are. So you have to accept that's the problem. And so how are we going to fix it? How are we going to make sure this doesn't happen again? We need to get the software out, and we need to do it in a way that just doesn't cause more problems and headaches and hassles for us. That's it. So we can go to that happy hour. That's it. That's why we're doing it.
We are just coming up on time, but I personally have one quick question that I hope you guys can answer like in a minute. This is day 2 apps, right? What happens on day 3?
Melissa, you want to take it?
I'm curious.
Rinse and repeat. Rinse and repeat. There is one thing we didn't discuss a whole lot, and that was the whole idea of rolling back.
Yeah.
You do need to consider being able to roll back. So I think that's definitely a day 3 problem.
Sure. Well, absolutely. I mean, look, Courtney, you're always going to have another challenge in front of you. Mm-hmm. We're never done with DevOps. It's an algorithm, right? We do our value stream map, or our blocks and sticks. And we're like, boy, are we spending a lot of time over here. Always. Well, guess what? You fix it. And what we've seen is that companies that start on their DevOps journey, the next big one is the database. Oh, boy, is it big. All right. It is a real time suck. But there's always going to be something else. But guess what? You've solved a hard one with application deployment. You've made a commitment to automate. Now you're applying those learnings to the next big rock, which is the database. It's up to you what the next one is. We've just seen this pattern of the database. Okay, fair enough. But for others, it might be something else. I don't mean to presume that, I know everything. I certainly do not. But you've learned how to do that. You've now tackled 2 problems in your delivery chain. Wonderful. Let's get the next one and the next one and the next one. And that's what's so exciting about this, is because there's always an opportunity to improve. And if you look at the State of DevOps report that came out this year, there's 2 things that jumped out at me. It's the one from Google Cloud, the Accelerate State of DevOps report. So the group that was started by Dr. Forsgren, she wrote Accelerate with a whole bunch of other really cool people. And so they came out and they said, all right, one, database is a challenge. All right, that was cool. But the other thing they pointed out is that there is this growing gulf between people that are not really all in on DevOps and the ones that are. And the ones that are just, their metrics are skyrocketing. And it's because they're always looking for that next thing. So Courtney, I don't have an answer for you. Just work the program, go through the steps,
No, I mean, it's this has been a really cool conversation for someone, again, who's not a techie. I'm in marketing. So as you can probably,
marketing is technical. Don't let anybody tell you it's not.
But this is great. I want to appreciate you guys letting me be a part of this. This has been a really great day. I know Melissa has a billion things to do. I know Robert has a million things to do. So I appreciate you guys both taking your time today. And thank you again for everybody for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone. Bye.